Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Susan Chandler from Massey Cancer Center's Integrative Health Program. Today, the topic is vaping, and with us is Constance Clark, or Connie Clark as we know her, the tobacco cessation specialist at Massey. She is going to talk to us about vaping, the new look of nicotine addiction. So Connie, take it away. Thank you so much for being with us. And if you have questions that come up during her presentation, just type them in the chat box and we'll address those at the end of her talk. Thanks, Connie.
Of course. Glad to be with everybody again today. I think last time we talked a little bit about tobacco treatment, and today my topic is vaping and the new look of nicotine addiction. And so I'll kind of just start by saying, in 2006, a man named Han Leek from China, he was a pharmacist, developed the first e-cigarette that came over to the US. And ironically, he developed it because his father was a heavy smoker and had died of lung cancer. And he too was a heavy smoker and designed this as a way to help eliminate health risks. However, to this date, I always think it's interesting to know that he now works for Big Tobacco and is not only vaping, but he is smoking as well. So that is kind of how it came to us in 2006. And I just kind of wanted to walk everyone through the different generations of e-cigarettes, vaping, pod mods, and so that you all will know what is actually in these products. Because I think the majority of people are under the assumption that it's wonderful flavoring and not a lot of nicotine. So kind of wanted to go through that today. So here's this nice graphic that just tells you, this is the evolution of ENDS, which is electronic nicotine devices. And it started in 2006 when it came over 2007 with the Cigalite. So I'm going to kind of go from slide to slide and show you pictures because we're doing this via Zoom. And if I was in person, I would pass it around. But since we're doing it this way, okay, we'll do pictures. So the first generation was the Cigalite, and that is what Han Leek developed. It was designed to literally look, act, and feel like a cigarette. So they were not rechargeable. They were, one and done. You could buy them. You could get a cigarette. You could get a cigar. And they had the piece in it that would do it, non-rechargeable. Typically, like the fin over there on the one side was 2 packs of cigarettes. That it's kind of generally what it was. Although I always tell people, depending on how hard they draw on these things, it might be a little less. But the whole idea of the first generation was look, act, feel like a cigarette, but non-rechargeable. So they came one and done. Then came the second generation, which were the Vape Pens. And these were rechargeable and refillable. And that was the big thing. They looked like a pen. They were cooler. You could buy them anywhere, but you could recharge them and you could refill them. And that is when the e-juices took off and went crazy. So I think I have at the end of this presentation, but there are over 15,000 different flavors of e-juice at this point that they have developed for people to use. But the vape pen was the next thing. You touch the button. This is why I hate we're not together in real life, but we're going to make it work. If you can see the button on the screen, you just touch the button, it heated the liquid, and boom. Now, this is also when, and I'm going to go to the next slide. So this is when I say using marijuana became, and the THC oils, the hash oil, became a big deal with this generation, because it was the second generation that I call the one-hit bong. So up in the corner, the rounded glass is basically, and the white right there is, and you can see, I tried to get pictures so you could see the coils in there is basically what you put the marijuana, the oil, the hash oil, the THC oil, and you put it in there, and heat it just like that vape pen I showed you a second ago. And then it literally, if you are from the generation of the bongs, it literally fills up into that glass and you just take one hit. So these were a disaster in that not only were people using it for tobacco products, but they were using it for marijuana and THC and hash oil. And kids were loving it because they could do this in school and anywhere because it literally is a one-hit thing. So Then came the actual herb pens that came in this generation as well, down in the corner. And those are specific so that you didn't have to use oils. You don't use the coil. It's basically, so I don't know if our viewers out there have ever seen like people who smoke marijuana and they have the bowls. They're typically like this and the bowl sits this way. With these pens, you just put the herb right in the top. It heats, you're good to go. So that came with the second generation. So I always think this kind of time frame is important because this particular, the herb pens, and I call them the little one-hit bongs, are still being used all the time. So this was significant. All right, now, then we came to the third generation. And the third generation brought with it the mods in the tank systems. And that is when we began to hear about them exploding. If you all remember in the news, you would see, oh, it exploded in somebody's face. But I'm going to say this, it typically did not explode because of what the person had bought. These systems were the first ones that people modified and amped up, because the point of the tank system is to produce the biggest cloud possible. This is when the cloud contest entered. And I'm going to date myself here to everyone and say, back in my day, because I'm in my 50s, when people went on spring break, it was wet t-shirt contests and whatever. Now with these systems came the cloud contest. So at most college campuses, spring break locations, you could win $10,000, $15,000 by creating the biggest cloud. And so these tank systems were meant to be amped up and produce the biggest, most intense cloud possible. If you guys ever want to YouTube it, you can YouTube cloud contest and you can see it is pretty phenomenal. They would do giant rings, they would walk through, but that was the point of this generation. The bigger, the better. This is where teenagers inform me. I often go to high schools and talk to teenagers, and they inform me that one of the games they play with this kind of system is a game of chicken. And they said, you know, Miss Clark, about chicken. And I said, well, I know when I was a kid. And they said, no, what they like to do is get in cars side by side, like they'll have two cars of people, 4 or 5 in a car. And the goal is to use these tank systems and blow the biggest clouds as much as possible, filling the car while they're driving on back roads. And the first one to hit the brakes loses. So again, the point of these systems is bigger, better, more amped up. And if you can see on the bottoms in the pictures, you can see like the straight up and down ones over here. Well, it's on my left. You start and you work your way up so that the amps go up and up and up and up, and you can produce a bigger and bigger cloud. So that was significant. These are rechargeable, refillable, but the point of them was to create the biggest cloud, which is interesting because when we get to the next generation, the goal of the fourth generation was to do the exact opposite. So enter the fourth generation, and these are the pod mod systems. And I would say the majority of what young people are using today, although I have a lot of adults that I see that are using these as well. And these are the pod mods. This is when the Juul came out. In 2015, Juul entered the market. And interestingly enough, the two guys who created the Juul worked for Apple prior. And so the goal was to create a product that was tech inspired, looked like tech, acted like tech, could be, people would not know what it was. And as you can see in the picture, oftentimes, I mean, people would use these in school and teachers really thought it was a flash drive. They did not know what they were doing. And the point of the pod mod is to produce as little smoke as possible. So they are flavored and uses, I mean, they produce very little smoke, very little smell. So, and I'll show you in a minute some pictures of some of the newer ones that have come out, because as Juul became popular and everybody knew about it and attention came to it, what they did was they didn't do away with the pod mod system, they just redesigned it. So I went to a training and they had a desk and had mixed with things that you would see on a desk normally, like, whiteout and pens and highlighters, all of these different systems. And the goal was, can you find the pod mods? Because they are truly designed to look, act, and fool and convince people that there's something they're not. So let me go to this next page because I would like to show you. So these are, I have a couple pages of these because I want people to see them. So there's the Soren Air, which is one over there. There is the pen, and I want to draw your attention to this. A couple of these I want to draw your attention to because these are what young people are loving and using. So the pen down there is actually a vape pen. It is a pod mod system, but when you buy it, it comes with refillable ink cartridges. So they literally can sit in class and do their homework and vape from the top of the pen. So when the clicker part is actually what you vape from. So fascinating. Kids love them. The one over here on my right is a key pen. I think it looks identical for me to my daughter's key. She has a Volkswagen and her key system looks very much like this. So when it's flipped down, you don't see that little thing that you're vaping from, and they carry it around all the time. People just think it's a key and then they pop it up and off they go. So these systems were really meant to be concealed and kind of they look like something that they're not. So down here on the bottom is one of my favorite ones, but I think, again, I'm going to date myself to everybody and tell you, it reminds me when I was a kid and I was in chorus class, the teacher always used that thing and she would tune everybody, and it would be a tuner. In real life, if you have this in your hand, it's about the size of that and it looks like it. But again, it's a pod mod system. So fascinating the way that they make these look, and kids love it. And there's some more on this page. Okay, so here's some more that I just want. So the puff bar down here on the bottom is another one that teenagers and actually my patients love it. And I'm going to tell everyone, if you remember Mr. Sketch scented markers, they smell as good as those. I mean, you get near one of those and the smell just from the flavoring is amazing and overwhelming. And those are one and done. So those, when Juul kind of became so popular that everybody knew about it, puff bars came on the market. And they're basically look and act the same way, but they're one and done. And the flavors are off the charts. Up in the top, I wanted to show, because this is another one that I see a lot of high school, college students using, is the hoodie. So one of the strings is actually the vape pen, and it's hidden in the hoodie. So you can lift up the string, take a hit off your vape, and then when they're in high school, middle school, college, they don't even have to leave the classroom. They literally just put their face down into the hoodie and exhale. So nobody even sees it. And remembering, these were really designed not to produce a lot of smoke or a lot of cloud. I shouldn't say smoke, it's not, it's a vape, but they're designed not to produce a lot of that. So it's easy to conceal. Down here on the bottom is one that is made as part of the, like your iPhone holder. So, but it has the vape that's in it. So you can literally walk around with your phone. You could be anywhere. Nobody even knows what it is. Unless I did this for a living, and as fast as they keep developing these products, I wouldn't know. The Apple Watch vape kind of is down here in the corner. So the vape itself is actually in the part that's detached, and you just literally pop it up, take a hit, bring it back down. And then the lipstick one, I have to say, the girls tend to really like it because they can be in the bathrooms in high school, middle school, wherever they are. And what girl isn't always in there? I guess they can get away with saying, oh, I'm just putting on my lip gloss, washing my hands and putting on my lip gloss. And really, that's just a vape. It's just cleverly disguised to look like something that it's not. And I think when they become popular, they develop new ones. So I always tell parents and people be on the lookout, because as quick as we recognize some, they will come up with new ones. All right. So did I go too fast? No. Oh, and then the fourth generation, I wanted to just touch on squonk mods. So that's really a combination of tank systems and these pod mods. And the whole idea, if you guys can see it, is let's see, it's up in my right-hand corner. The one's up in the right-hand corner. The idea is that you can keep the juice. And so instead of like those pod mod systems where it's already done, when you want to take a hit, you can press that and squeeze the juice, wet the wick, and get it as, like moist and wet as possible before you take that hit. So you're getting like fresh flavor, fresh nicotine. And so those kind of came out too. I think it's kind of hit or miss depending on the area, whether people are using those. But I always think it's good to be aware of them. So I want to kind of talk about, and I want to make sure I don't get carried away with time like I tend to do, because I think one of the things that's so important to talk about with you all today is the amount of nicotine that is in these systems and how it changed. So when I showed you first the cig-alikes and the tank systems and the vape pens, they all used what's called free-base nicotine. It's the same nicotine that's in cigarettes, in dip, and basically it's that nicotine that hits the back of your throat when you take a drag of a cigarette or when you use one of those cig-alikes. And they could put with free-base nicotine about the same amount as you would get in a pack of cigarettes. And that's why like the fin was like equal to about 2 packs of cigarettes, because that's how big the cartridge was. The defining moment came when they created the Juul in the pod mod systems, because they switched from free-base nicotine to nicotine salts. And basically all they did was they added benzoic acid to the mix to free-base nicotine. And what that allowed them to do, it actually reduces the pH level and allows them to put double the nicotine in the pod, and it doesn't have that hit at the back of the throat. So when you're looking at those pod mod systems, those cartridges, it's not equivalent to a pack of cigarettes. So what they found even with Juul was one cartridge, one of those little pods that went in there. They were trying to say, oh, it's equivalent to a pack of cigarettes, but it wasn't. They were using nicotine salts. And so really a pack of cigarettes has about 24 milligrams worth of nicotine in it. And one of those pods with Juul was 54 milligrams. So you were getting more than double the nicotine and didn't know it. And I tell people all of the time, so my patients, I come in, I have some that are, I switched over to the puff bar because I thought it would help me quit. But what they don't understand is all of those systems are using nicotine salt. So you're not only getting the same amount that you were getting from cigarettes, you're getting more than double. So I had a patient who was using 5 cartridges a day. That was more than 10 packs of cigarettes worth of nicotine. And I think that that's one of the biggest misconceptions with these products, and really knowing the difference between the generations. Because once you moved to the pod mod, that 4th generation, everything switched to nicotine salts. And each cartridge, if it contains nicotine. And I think that's another misconception with people, is that they think that there is no nicotine involved. Oh, it's just flavoring. I hear that from teenagers all the time. Oh, well, it's great. It's just flavoring, but it's not. It's not. And any of these new pod mod systems, nicotine is always there. They're using nicotine salt, they're flavoring it, and it will always contain nicotine and probably double what they're getting if they were smoking. So I'm always trying to get that out, because I believe that teenagers are brilliant human beings. My patients are brilliant human beings. And I think a lot of it is misconception and not knowing what they're putting in their mouths or what they're using, because they truly are marketed as being something. When they first came out, I remember when the cig-alikes came out and they had famous people on there and they were, oh, switch to this, it's better for you. So part 2 of this is not just the amount of nicotine in these products, but I also want you guys to know that it also contains many of the same chemicals as, here we go, many of the same chemicals as cigarettes and traditional tobacco. So, and tobacco is formaldehyde, which is what is used for embalming fluid, and what we used in biology class that the worms and the frogs were in to keep them preserved. That's in every cigarette you smoke and every dip that you put in. It's also in vaping products. And so I think the misconception is, oh, it's just water vapor, but it's not. It's not water vapor, it's an aerosol. So think in terms of, what do we know of aerosols? We know, like, we use air fresheners, hairsprays, and it's that principle. It's not water vapor. It is an aerosol that you are putting into your lungs. And so some of the, cancer causing chemicals that are in tobacco products are also in these vaping products. Also, diacetyl is one of the chemicals that they use in most of the flavorings. And that I mentioned there were over 15,000 of. And diacetyl is that chemical, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right. I always think I'm saying incorrectly, so my apologies. But it was the whole, I don't know if anybody remembers the popcorn lung, that whole thing where they were doing the microwave popcorn and the people were working in the factory, and they started developing this condition that they termed popcorn lung. This is the same chemical that they're using in the flavorings that they're selling for these products. So I always want people to be aware of what you're putting in your body. It is not a water vapor. It is an aerosol. It contains many of the same chemicals that cigarettes and dip contain. It is not just nothing. And so I truly believe that when people know that, they make better decisions about what they're going to try and what they're not. It does have all the metals, nickel, tin, lead, ultrafine particles. And the other thing is, and this is before the pandemic, it was a big deal. And then the pandemic hit, we haven't heard as much about it. EVALI, which was the lung disease that they attributed to people vaping. And I think part of that is they did determine that some of it was vitamin E, I think is the last that I heard about it. And they tried to say, I remember at the beginning, oh, it's just for people who are using marijuana or oils, but they determined that was not it because people were using both. But I tell people all the time, so if you're putting in your body some of the things that may have been approved by the FDA for ingestion, it is not the same when you're inhaling it. Your lungs are not designed to absorb those oils that maybe you would do if you were ingesting, eating, and processing it in a different way. So I think that that's an important piece as well, because people will say that all the time, well, some of the things that are in there are FDA approved. And I say, for ingestion, not for inhalation in your lungs. And so I think, again, another piece that if people understood, they might make different decisions. I will say, let me look at the time, Susan. You know me, I could go on and on. I'm trying to be mindful of time today. But I will say, I do think being educated about what these products are, how much nicotine is involved and what you're using is helpful as far as determining what you're going to use to help you get off of it. And that's what we talked about before. Having the right information is important. All right, Susan, that was it for me today. I tried to keep it right at 20 minutes.
You did great, Connie. That was so much information over such a short period of time. It was amazing. And I had forgotten, I'd heard a little bit about vaping, and I had not heard that it was almost twice as much, or at least twice as much, sometimes more nicotine. I did remember hearing, well, I'd forgotten it until I heard you say it, that although they may contain materials FDA approved for ingestion, that's not the same as FDA approved for inhalation, and how damaging that could be.
No, exactly.
So, yeah. One of the questions we've gotten, have you ever heard of vape tongue? And if so, do you know what might cause that?
Vape tongue. I am going to be honest and tell you I have not heard of that, but my assumption, I wish I knew who asked that question, because I'm wondering if it's as a result of the different chemicals that are in the different vape juices that are on the tongue. Again, I will say, remember, it's not a water vapor, it's an aerosol. So you're putting an aerosol filled with all of those different products, chemicals, and the first landing spot is going to be on the tongue, just like it is with smoking. So you remember smoker's tongue. Did you ever see pictures of that? Yeah. So I'm thinking it must be, it's like thrush. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, you saw that.
And
okay.
I did. I saw that. And I haven't seen it, but I would say it's from the chemicals. It's from all of those things that are actually in it. And because it's an aerosol going into the mouth, hitting the tongue first. So just like with tobacco products.
Yeah. So you
Right.
talked to us about the different generations. Any idea of what's coming next?
So on the market, I know is IQOS, which is a heat to burn product. It's not a vape thing, but this is Big Tobacco's new. They already use it in Europe, and it was approved here. Is the IQOS, which is so it looks almost like a little cigarette. Look at me, get my hands about this big, and it has a holder you put it in. You do not. It heats it till it's almost burning, but not. So they can call it non-combustible, similar to the vape products. And people are using it, and they tried to sell it as a harm reduction product. But I will tell you once again, it contains every chemical that tobacco products contain. So, and I would tell people, I think this is an important conversation to have all of the time with the pod mod systems, because they evolve constantly. So as soon as, and especially in schools, because these conversations probably need to start a lot earlier than we're having them, because they're products used by 4th, 5th, 6th graders. And I think because they evolve so quickly, having parents, teachers, everybody be aware of what to look out for is crucial. And they will ask me all the time, how do I know if they're designed not to produce a lot of smoke? I always say you can tell by the smell, but it's not tobacco smell. It's a sweet, almost like a sweet smell, that if you walk into a bathroom and people have been using those products, you can smell it.
Okay, I wondered about that. I would assume that the user could taste it, obviously smell it, but for the non-user, there is an odor that lingers. Okay, and it's sweet.
It's sweet. You gotta know what you're looking for, because really what you're smelling is the remnant of whatever flavor. And it tends to be it's kind of a sweet smell. So if I walk into a bathroom somewhere, I can tell if they've been doing it, or even into a classroom. But teachers don't know that. So they might assume it's a body spray of some kind,
Yeah. Well, our sense of taste, a sweet is the very last sense that leaves us. So I can understand why they would go after or target something that was sweet, as opposed to something else.
Yeah, I think it's kind of scary. I mean, I had been called to the hospital a couple times in my previous position to talk to college students who really had no clue how much nicotine they were ingesting and were almost ODing on. And when I say that, I shouldn't say ODing. Their heart it's such a high powered stimulant. And when you're doing 4 or 5 cartridges a day and you don't know how much nicotine you're getting, they're showing up at the hospital thinking I'm having panic attacks, when really you have so much nicotine in your system right now, and they don't know. They're unaware.
Yeah, that's the overwhelming thought that kept coming back to me. This is so unfair, because I think that there's probably a subset of people that genuinely think they're reducing their risk.
Oh yeah.
And unfortunately, they're amping up their nicotine consumption, plus all the other unsafe practices that they're in.
It's true. And I think research shows that typically people who vape in that amount tend to be dual users too. So it's not that they're exclusively just vaping. Most of the time they're dual users. So they're smoking or dipping and vaping. So the nicotine content is off the
significant.
Charts. It is. And so when I'm helping patients, I have to be very aware of how much nicotine they're getting, so that we can create a treatment plan that minimizes withdrawal symptoms, because that's a massive amount of nicotine to come off of.
So what would be your strategy for someone who is vaping, like the individual that was essentially using 10 packs of cigarettes a day? What would be your strategy?
So, well, with that particular patient, we actually went with Chantix and the patch. So because they work on different mechanisms, Chantix basically is just a blocker, but the patch is really helping get her off So the idea with the patch is really that we're getting to clean nicotine. So, right. So,
Okay.
so with her, because she had such a massive amount of nicotine that she was trying to come off of, we did Chantix and the patch. And also she used just the little lozenges as a way of just reducing. And so she was able to pretty quickly get rid of the cigarettes that she was smoking as well, and down to 1 cartridge at the moment. But it's a slow process too, because if you go cold turkey off that amount of nicotine, holy cow.
What would happen? What would she feel like?
Well, horrid, but she would probably have headaches, be angry, anxious, not sleeping, pacing around, which is what I say to teachers when I'm at schools, because they're like, kids can't sit still in class. They can't do this. They can't. And I'm thinking to myself, what are they using? Because if they're on that high powered stimulant, they can't sit still. They can't. And they can't get what they need. Imagine starting to come off of all of that. So really, like, it is an intense withdrawal, and it is miserable and can last 2 to 3 weeks. So trying to minimize that. And I know that doctors now are even using some of these, not Chantix, but patches, gum, lozenges with some teenagers to help them because of the amount of nicotine they're coming off of.
Right, right. So if I were a parent and I had teenagers, what would your message to me be? And also, how do you treat, this is 2 questions, how do you treat teenagers differently than you might, and you kind of, than adults? You kind of alluded to that.
So I think, like, and I tell parents this all the time when I go talk at PTA meetings or whatever, I think these conversations have to start early. And I always say, for parents who are uncomfortable with how to start the conversations, car time is it. So anytime you're riding in the car with your kids, it's a great opportunity to have a conversation about some of these things where they don't have to look you in the eye. You don't have to look them in the eye. So there isn't that feeling of, oh, if I say I have friends that are doing it, she's going to look at me with that look in her eye. And I think it's a great opportunity to give them the correct information about what is actually in these products, because where they're getting their information is from other teenagers who don't know. So I think the conversations have to start early, and I think they gradually build up by age level, so that by the time they're in high school, you're having these conversations and they know how you feel about it. And I think a big part of it too, and I think I talked a tad bit about this last time, but especially with teenagers, I think is a huge piece of understanding the stress that they are going through in their lives and helping them create new coping strategies. Because most of the time it starts them wanting to do something their friends are doing, and it turns into a coping strategy for all of the stress that they're dealing with. And so I think parents being aware of that and really being in tune and talking to their kids in a non-judgmental way about what's going on and giving them feedback. I mean, we know what parents have to say and how they feel is still so important to their children, so I think it's a continual conversation that you have starting at a very early age and age appropriately moving. And I think
great advice.
Yes. And I think what to look for in their houses is kind of keep up to date on what these products look like and pay attention to what they're doing. Look for the sweet smell. I mean, if you're smelling something and you're like, that's not the kind of perfume she uses, or the body spray that he uses all the time, look into it, have a conversation. And I do think talk to the doctor. I will say, if you have someone that is using those products, it's crucial to have a conversation with the doctor about it, because they can really be a great partner in helping them get off of these products.
So since you primarily work at Massey Cancer Center and are seeing oncology patients, what would your message, my favorite question is, what is the one thing, the takeaway point, what would you want them to know today?
So about vaping, you want me to specifically say vaping products. So I think for me, just working with patients here is, again, that misconception that they are not nicotine-free products. And as much as you think you're moving to a harm reduction or something that is replacing it, 9 times out of 10, you're probably increasing the nicotine intake you're already getting. And come to me, or to your primary doctor, to anybody, and have a partner in figuring out how to best wean yourself down off of that nicotine. And I had patients this morning I worked with, there's no set pat way There are 7 medications the FDA recommends, and there are so many combinations within those 7 that I think it's truly about finding what works for them and not giving up. Knowing that if A and C don't work, I'm going to go to B and D, and we're going to try those things. It is a process, and they can do it. But I would say about the vaping products, stay away. Stay away. I tell them that all the time. It's not a benefit.
Right. So if a patient from Massey is listening, how can they get in touch with you? How can they get help? What's
So
the
they
best
can,
way?
I will say they can have their doctor put a referral in to see me. They can call me. I mean, I actually have a phone number now, Susan. Since last time I have a phone number. So I have a phone number that I can give you, or we can, put out somewhere that they can call, make an appointment to talk to me. I will come meet them if they're at the cancer center. I meet patients in infusion, and I meet patients all over the place. I have office hours at the Jackson Center and at Stony Point. So I'm here. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you find the medication piece to help you manage the addiction. And then the other piece of it is I am here to help you come up with new coping strategies. So
great. So I think probably if we share your email address, maybe that would be the best way.
Absolutely.
And you can see that if you're watching at the bottom of her picture, it's constance.clark without an E at vcuhealth.org. And there's no E on either. Let's see, Constance, CONSTANS. Leave out the last part, and then Clark without an E. Yep. Connie, you have delivered such great information for our patients and for people who aren't our patients, just to help protect their health. Thank you so much, and we look forward to your next talk.
Anytime.
Thanks for being with us. Bye-bye.
Yep. Have a great day.